Hi, and welcome to Trust and Obey with Chuck Frank. This is a Tuesday, late afternoon. Chuck it entitled Build Back Mejor. So, this is a day after the inauguration, and wow, all I can tell you is I started watching early in the morning, and I could not believe looking at the National Mall without a soul on it. And it just made me so angry that there is so much evil and subterfuge trying to stop Trump from being able to govern and denying him the tradition of the inauguration outside with the Washington Monument in the distance. And, they did everything to tie him up in his first presidency. And they didn't go inside because of the weather. They went inside because they didn't want anybody to get hurt. And so, I know a lot of people that went, and I know many, many of them that morning were disappointed and disoriented, and they brought kids and all kinds of things, and they were hoping to be a part of this momentous historical occasion. And guess what? They were a part of an even more momentous historical occasion. And they got to actually see a president and his governing body put the people first, put their safety first, and at the last minute, be able to get that arena and get all the security taken care of and have something special for those folks. And they didn't even know that. All they knew was, well, we're not going to get to see him. We're going to be watching on a jumbotron. I could have stayed home. No, guess what? They saw something special, and they saw a group of people who have a can-do attitude and absolutely wanted the best for everybody. But if you watched the ceremony from the rotunda, you saw Trump and his people surrounded by the demoniacs. And you could see on their faces that they can't wait to stop him from his intended purpose. And I believe they never wanted him to be able to complete this inauguration. That's why they were so smug when the vote was authorized, and they were all going, we're law and order, we love democracy and the Constitution, and we don't behave like you people do on the 6th. Yeah. Didn't buy 1 second of that. And so now, what are we left with? We're left with a fantastic new beginning for our country, as Trump is promising, an American golden age. And if you thought that that was too lofty a vision, then you weren't paying attention. And everything that he said was encapsulated in him going from the rotunda to the Cap One Center and being with those people and having the parade there inside, in front of them, safe, secure, and by the way, not in freezing cold wind. So that's a good thing. And then he signs, I don't know how many executive orders in front of them all, but they're seeing him do what he said he would do. And he said, guess what? I'm going to pardon 1,500 J6 people. And they went wild. And he had all those Jewish families up there who had lost people in October 7th and were waiting for people to be released. And there's so much good going on. And then at the same time, there is so much evil that has been planned and strategized to make it impossible for him to govern. And don't kid yourselves. We are targets in all of that. I don't know if any of you saw the story or not. It was late in the afternoon yesterday at the border. Deputies stopped a car and they found 10,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition and 20,000 rounds of rifle ammunition, AK-47 ammunition. Now, that's just one car and one stop. This regime that's left has let in tens of thousands of people who mean us harm. They have sheltered them, they've given them money, they've made sure that they have weapons and ammunition and tools for coordination. And guess what? This is not the first time this has happened. And so I want to read from you from the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah lived around 450 BC. And his family, long before he was born, were taken into captivity when Jerusalem was destroyed. And when I say destroyed, it was a pile of rubble. And so he was born in captivity. He never had even seen Jerusalem. And I think about that, and I think about how many Americans have never seen the United States functioning well with people being patriotic and proud and God-fearing. But I'm old enough to remember that. I'm old enough that those are my memories of growing up. And that all began to change after President Kennedy was killed. And so when I think about us having a golden age, I think about not having a dysfunctional country, but a patriotic country where everyone identifies with American exceptionalism and greatness because everyone's got their shoulder to the wheel and trying to make that happen. And this is what happened with Nehemiah. Nehemiah is born in captivity. He's never been to the land of Israel where all of his forefathers are and where their bones are buried. And someone comes back and informs him that this thing that's been described to him, the temple and everything, it's all just a pile of rubble. And so he gets depressed and he tries to overcome his sadness because his job is to be the king's cupbearer. And so he stands by the king, and the king does not drink anything or eat it without Nehemiah sampling it first to make sure it's not poisoned. But an interesting thing about this, it is against the law to be sad in the presence of the king because the king's considered a god. And if you're sad in his presence, then you're inferring that it's not good enough to be in his presence. And so the penalty for that is death. So Nehemiah's there and he's overwhelmed by the information he's heard from people who had come back from the site of Jerusalem. And the king goes, "What's wrong with you today?" And he goes, "Oh, nothing, king. Live forever. I'm good. I'm good." And the king goes, "No, I'm not buying that. This is sadness of heart, what you're experiencing." And Nehemiah is getting terrified. He thinks he's going to be killed for being sad in the presence of the king. And the king says, "Tell me." And so Nehemiah says a quick prayer to God, and then he goes for it. He says, "How can I be happy, king, when the city of my ancestors and where all their bones are buried is totally destroyed and just a pile of rocks? It absolutely is breaking my heart." And the king goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" He goes, again, a quick prayer to God. I want to go back and rebuild it. This guy didn't have any construction background, nothing. He's a cupbearer. He doesn't even know what the place looked like before. And the king, because God has control over everyone, great and small, the king goes, okay, tell me what you need. Tell me how long it's going to take. Now, he would never do that, okay, without God putting his hand on him. And so Nehemiah goes back there. He has the resources, but he's in the situation just like Trump is. The whole thing is, in Nehemiah's case, it's torn down already. Trump needs to tear most of this down and rebuild it. And just like Nehemiah's situation, the people who are supposed to be loyal and internal to that effort, many of them are working against him. And then he's surrounded by enemies who want to prevent him from being able to do it. And this task is overwhelming, and he has no experience. And he's working with just the remnant of people that are there. And he can't even find shelter and protection because all the walls are down. So all he can do is pray to God, and that's all we can do. Because if you're putting your faith in human beings, that's not going to work. Okay? It is too overwhelming, and there is too much subterfuge that has been planned by our beloved democracy-loving Democrats. Okay? And they will rue the day that they did this, because it'll all be found out, and Trump will prevail in all of this because he is God's tool. And so let's see what Nehemiah was facing. We're going to read from chapter 4. It starts, "Nevertheless, we made our prayer to our God, and because of them," meaning all the enemies that are trying to prevent them from rebuilding Jerusalem, "because of them, we set a watch against them day and night." That's a clue for us. That means there's no downtime now in this project that we're all undertaking. We have to be alert day and night. It says, "Then Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall." What's he talking about? He's talking about all these things that are in their way to impede their progress. That is what the Democrats have been planning for the last 3 or 4 months. "And our adversary said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease." These are all the terrorists that have been provisioned and are all around our country. And guess what? Their go sign was when the border got closed yesterday at 1 p.m. "So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came that they told us 10 times, from whatever place you turn, they will be upon us." They're saying it's impossible. You can't build anything because you're going to be attacked from 10 different directions. It's odd that they use that, because there's a pastor with a prophecy online right now saying 10 cities. God showed me 10 cities that are going to have major destruction as soon as the border is closed. "Therefore, I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows." We're going to see this scene too. "And everybody better get their families defensively minded." And if you're wondering from what, take a look at the October 7th videos in Israel. That's what. Verse 14, "And I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. That's a message for us. And it happened when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, everyone to his work. In other words, we continue to rebuild the New Jerusalem. So it was from that time on that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and war armor, and the leaders were behind all the house of Judah. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked at construction and with the other held a weapon. That has to be our posture. Every one of the builders had his sword girded at his side as he built, and the one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. Then I said to the nobles and rulers and the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we labored in the work, and half of the men held the spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time, I also said to the people, let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem, that they may be our guard by night and a working party by day. He's telling us exactly what's going to happen. So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. These people were sleeping in their clothes. They were ready to go. They were on watch all the time. I know it's very hard for you to hear this. I know that, it was such a wonderful day yesterday, and that everybody thinks, oh, great, look at all the work they did in less than 24 hours. This is going to be amazing. It's not going to be amazing in that way. It's going to be amazing because we all need to come together. God is not just going to sit back and go, well, let's see what Trump and his 1,000 people he hired, let's see what they can get done. No, this is about all of us, each and every one of us. And we're given two directives. That is that we have to tear down the altars of our enemies. Trump can write executive orders, but we in our communities have to shout down all this Marxist madness that has been running amok, not just for the last 4 years, but for decades. Those altars have to be torn down. And God is not removing the enemies from our midst, just as Nehemiah had them all around him. And he had to do construction work with a construction tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. That is going to have to be our posture. Our punishment for being passive and allowing all this to happen is that God's not getting rid of these people. We are going to have to. And God is not going to tear down their altars. We have to tear them down. And that will be the sign to him that we're serious. So you saw a lot of serious people doing really fine things at this inauguration. And you saw a lot of Americans who came and wanted to be a part of history. And they were a part of history, and they are a part of history. But the major part of this story begins today. And so many of us are going to be just like Nehemiah. We're going to be asked to do things that we feel like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. And I happen to be reading from my personal Bible study which comes from Charles Stanley's organization. And I just want to read a section of it because it's exactly about this. And it is such a wonderful thought process for our time. It says, no restriction exists on what God can do through your life, each and every one of us. The strength of his spirit overcomes human limitations. Don't have enough courage? Don't have the right skills? God can fix that. Lay down what's holding you back. Trust that the Lord will empower you to do whatever he calls you to do. We can be certain he will properly equip and train his children for the work. We're all in on this project. We're all going to be asked to do the work. And maybe the majority of us are going to be asked to do things that we're not comfortable with, that we don't think we're good enough for. That's what God wants to see. He wants to see that you'll ask him to fix that and then give you the courage to step forward and save your country, save our constitutional republic, and make it once again the new Jerusalem, the shining city on the hill. God bless you, and let's get working.